This is the second meeting I've held like this. It's somewhat of an experiment. I truly thank you all for coming. We've got about a dozen folks in the room right now, something like that. And I'll run 1 hour, and what I think I'll do tonight, last time I opened it up just to questions, and this time I think I'll talk for about a half hour. I thought what I would do is go over the 3 most recent papers in a rather brief form, and then open up the last half hour to questions, if you'd like to do that. So that's the idea, and I guess we'll get started here. And if you have a ton of questions in the background, and that's more important to you, then I might shift gears a little bit. But that's my general idea right now. So thanks again, and so here we go. There are 3 papers that I put up over the last couple months, I guess. And the work that I have focused on over the last 3 or 4 years is devoted almost exclusively to the biological aspects of these operations. It's about an 11-year history here right now of work. And the work went through several phases. The first couple of years is simply literally just recording with photographs what is happening, just pure documentation of changes in the environment. And the work develops over the years, and quite a bit of work gets into the physical analysis and sampling and that type of thing. And but over the last 3 or 4 years, it has shifted and focused on the biological aspects, and those biological aspects showed up actually just about at the beginning, close to the first work was done at the beginning of 1999, and within a year or two there were actually indications of some biological implications to this, and over the years that became increasingly important and serious, I suppose I would say, on my side of things. Because how do we say about our health and the existence of human life on the planet? That's when people usually get more personal about what's going on. And the evidence over time showed that the biological aspect was indeed very serious and seems to certainly affect a broad segment of the population, if not the vast majority of it. So that's where the focus has been, and probably will remain so in the immediate future, because the body of work that was done on the physical side and the documentation side is in place. And if there was something that I would find in error or seriously wrong with those analyses that had been done, I would correct that information. But I really don't have that at this point. That work, to me, is solid, has stood the test of time, and is still open to duplication, replication, and refutation, depending whether or not anyone wishes to do anything about it. But in the meantime, the consequences have progressed to the point where the biology of our species, as well as it appears maybe the planet itself, may be affected. We don't know that yet. But certainly our biology appears to have been affected. So, to get into these papers, and we have to understand that what I'm speaking of tonight is the culmination of a very long chain of research, several years. And it's hard to describe the amount of work and time that it takes to reach certain conclusions. But we have reached certain conclusions at this time, and that's what I'm going to try to pass on, at least in just a very, very quick summary view. But if we truly want to appreciate sort of the chain of evidence that has developed here over the last 11 years, it's very insightful, I believe, to trace back through that history and chronology of papers to see how knowledge has developed, and also how difficult and slow it has been to develop, primarily because of, I guess we could say, the lack of cooperation and support at any type of formal level. as one would expect in a situation like this. I mean, if we had a particular illness or medical condition that had developed, you would think that there would be rather immediate interest and support for improving that situation. But it's not the case. We have a long history and litany of refusal and denial on these issues that we're covering. So, the three papers they're titled A New Classification, Discovery and a Proposal, and Growth Inhibition Confirmed. And I'll take these in reverse order. And my hope is that you can all see the website in the center of the page here. That's my guess. And hope so that we can sort of go through these papers briefly and get an idea of what they're showing. And let me turn this camera down just a little lower. Okay, so in reverse order, and again, this is sort of the end line of research. There's so much that we can talk about in terms of what it took to get to this point. But I'm going to start with this paper. If it'll come up, let's see if this works for us. Yeah, so everything will be reduced, but hopefully you can see it. And I'm going to just hit some of the highlights of what these papers are about, and then we'll talk. The situation on this paper called A New Classification, we see the date. I'll stop moving that screen on you sometime there soon too. This was done February 3rd, so we're talking about a month and a half ago. I would regard this paper as simply a realization. You know, the word epiphany, that when you have sort of a moment of realization, that's what this paper represents to me. Others may have their own view, and that's always the case. This is simply a moment of realization in my life on this work. And, you know, here's the situation. And tonight we are focusing on what is popularly referred to as the Morgellons issue, Morgellons condition. The situation is that you have a condition, a medical condition, that exists for many, many years. You have reports. I would think we have at least 2006, somewhere in there is where they're starting. We can trace down that history. But several years ago, the issue emerges. You start having the reports, and you have a certain a pattern of denial and marginalization and refusal that takes place with that issue. And I have to say, those patterns of behavior certainly attracted my attention in their similarity to the same patterns which had been exhibited for the aerosol research that I had done. The tactics of attempting to ridicule someone, to deride them, to marginalize them, in this case, literally call them crazy. Right? This is the sort of official doctrine that came out of this, was basically labeling these people that were reporting this physical condition as delusional, even though they had these physical symptoms that could be seen in front of your face if you wanted to acknowledge or look at it. So you had these contradictions appear, and certainly that pattern of behavior caught my interest very, very early in the game, because there are certain strategies and tactics that are involved when one wishes to manipulate or control an issue, and those patterns were evident. Well, if we sort of fast forward here, you have the situation go on for several years, and in the meantime there is progressing research that is starting to describe in great detail what it is that's being observed and seen here, down to the microscopic level. You know, I can't remember the date on my first paper, but if we look at it, it'll be several years ago, and you'll start to see things under the microscope, and you'll see some questions come up where it's not making a lot of sense in terms of conventional biology. And the problem is that no one's answering. Now, this has been a problem all along, but when you put something under the microscope and you show it, and you ask for an identification or answer to what it is that's being seen, and nothing comes forth, no matter how often you put that out there, there's plenty of opportunities to refute it if it's not the case.